Hey, what's up, YouTubers? I'm Pruitt, and this is Jim Davis. And today's WebDM is going to be a point-counterpoint on the intricacies of combat. Whether you see it as more of a sport, well, we just went in the dungeon, we gave 110%, we left it all out on the field, but we did good, we got a lot of items, and I think we did really good today. And then there's more of the style of war, like...
First we laid the fire traps around the village, and then we waited till they were all in the field, before the wizard ignited the whole thing. Afterwards, we sent in the dogs.
Let me have a sip of my sweet tea.
This ain't no sipping tea.
Oh, man.
I got a case of the silly's bad, guys.
I know, that's fine. Let's use it.
All right.
Let's use it.
Let's use it. Channel it into WebDM.
Channel it into the serious subject of combat. Jim Davis.
Combat
in D&D.
Combat.
Is, it's one of the pillars of play. Combat.
It's first among equals, certainly, in terms of the pillars of play.
Right?
Yeah, equals. There are a lot of rules that are dedicated just towards combat. Combat is the only time in the game when things get meticulous and we want to know what happens moment by moment.
Yeah, everything goes into bullet time.
Yes. We've got social interaction and role-playing.
Yeah.
And we've got environmental exploration. And while there are some rule support for them, there's more rule support for combat, and to be honest, that's why a lot of people show up. They're there for the action.
Right.
They're there for the excitement of it.
Yeah, it's a dangerous, harrowing world full of monsters and villains, and people are constantly trying to come and get your stuff. Okay.
Right.
When approaching combat.
When approaching it.
How do you see it? Should you do D&D combat real, like war?
Right.
This is war,
like war,
right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's a game.
There's a spectrum. So combat as war is, in some people's words, and pardon my French, fantasy fucking Vietnam.
Right.
And it's like they are out to get you, and the enemies are out to kill you, and you are out to kill them, and you want to approach combat in a spirit of gaining as many advantages for yourself, winning the fight before it starts, and basically just have your character over there reading The Art of War and some Machiavelli, and just being as ruthless as they can with how they approach it. And then there's combat as sport, which says we are here to have fun combats. Combat is fun in and of itself. It is an interesting thing that we can do, and if combats and fights are fair and not necessarily one-sided, then everybody gets a chance to shine. We get to use our special powers that we all have that are really cool, and we can have this interesting fight that takes place and advances the story that we've got going, and we can have a good time with that. So that's sort of the two extremes. I think most people probably fall somewhere in the middle in terms of what they prefer and the types of comments that they run.
What do you see as the advantages of each side of this argument?
So I think the advantages for, say, a combat as war approach is that, as a DM, you can say, here are the threats that are out there. They exist independently of the party. This cave will always be a cave of first level kobolds. This grove over here is always going to be guarded by a bunch of magically controlled owlbears. You can just lay your map out and have the threats that are there. If they go in the sewers and fight flesh golems, then they're going in the sewers and fighting flesh golems, whether it's at first level or 20th level. The combat as war approach says, if that first party of first level characters wants to clear out that entire goblin lair, then they're going to have to think pretty strategically about it. They're going to have to smoke those goblins out, lay traps for them, try to find another monster that they can ally with to go and help them out. Maybe they poison a well or the goblins' food supply, deny them some essential resource that they need to continue. And maybe they do all that and never once draw a sword. Whereas the combat as sport approach to clearing out that goblin cave is, all right, the PCs gear up, they're ready, they're in formation, let's roll initiative, here's the first encounter, and here's the second encounter. And maybe the outcome of one encounter might influence other ones down the road in small and subtle ways, but it's not about, you showed up to have a fight. Right, you showed up on game day to play the game, as it were, and you want to have that. Whereas combat as war is going to say, no, if we can start a forest fire that smokes them out and they all choke in their goblin cave, then what do we care? You know,
just burn down the village.
Just burn it down. And so, yes, combat as war tends to involve a lot of uses of fire, in my experience.
Yeah, well, the one story that I'm reminded that you told me was what is it? The guy who got his dad to play D&D for the first time.
It's on some blog I read, some old school blog, and his dad was a Vietnam War vet, and he said he showed his dad the player's handbook, and he looked at the equipment list and came out with a case of Molotov cocktails and a bunch of war dogs. And it was just like, yeah, let's fight this way. And I think that that's an approach to combat as war that really looks at it and goes, yeah, this is not about knights in shining armor gloriously battling each other. If my goal is on the other side of this monster, then I want to expend as few resources as possible getting to that goal. And if that means I trick that monster, if I use underhanded, dirty tactics, if I don't ever have to roll initiative because that monster is taken out of the equation without me having to do anything, all the better.
Yeah.
Why risk a fight?
You maybe go out in the woods, dig a deep pit,
Right.
and you get one of your dogs to get it, and
bring
it
back.
back. Lure it to fall into the pit,
nail it with
and then you
Molotov
throw a Molotov
cocktails.
cocktail down there and burn him alive and walk off.
Yeah, and in original versions of the game, in early versions of the game, that's a style that really works for the type of game that's being played. But as Dungeons & Dragons has evolved and as player preferences have evolved and changed, it seems like a lot of people want the action. They want to be the iconic characters. They want the armor, the swords, the magic, the bows. They want that image.
Yeah.
They want to be fantasy Avengers battling the hordes that come down and saving the day. And I think that style in a combat as war approach is very difficult. You can do it, but it has a tendency to lead to antagonistic DMing. If you're giving XP for killing monsters, then you're gonna get murder hobos. Right.
Well, okay,
You know?
no.
Like
and,
those are some of the downsides to the combat as war approach.
and well, okay, let's get into that, because depending on how you hand out XP, it might change how your players play.
Oh, I think like the way that the DM handles XP is going to determine. So I mean, like it's going to be one of the primary drivers of how players behave next to just their own expectations. Yeah, if you give most of your XP for killing monsters, and then you tell the players like, yeah, here's the environment, here's what it is, do whatever you want to do, and I'm going to play that way as well. My monsters are going to treat, if you invade their home, they are going to treat you as an invader. Expect them to try to kill you. Don't expect them to play fair. I will light this hallway on fire with oil when you go invade the Kobold warrens. Tucker's Kobolds is an example of this from a DMing perspective. And Tucker's Kobolds is a story that was in Dragon, I think maybe the 80s, late 80s or 90s. And so it like describes this DM, and of course he was a vet. It was like, if you can ever play with military guys in D&D, do it. Just even if it's once or twice. If you can ever get in on a group of veterans or on an army base somewhere, then play it. Because it's an exceptional experience of D&D. So this particular guy set up a mega dungeon, had a lot of layers. The first layer was kobolds, and the way his players describe it is it didn't matter what level they were. First level, 10th level, they didn't matter. Those kobolds extracted a price in blood and treasure for going through, and it was just because of murder holes and secret passages. The kobolds weren't leveled up. They weren't super kobolds.
They're just kobolds.
They just used pit traps, flaming oil, deadfalls, dead ends, secret tunnels to make traveling through their domain a living nightmare. And henchmen are going to die. You're going to waste a ton of hit points just getting through there, a lot of resources just traveling through. You might have to leave treasure behind because you're running out of there. And it's used an example of a way to challenge higher level parties in D&D with a low level monster through the use of tactics alone.
Well, if you never can, it doesn't matter if you have 5 attacks and you can smite the hell out of them if you never see them.
If you never see them. And so like 5th edition is perfect for this style because you can move, shoot, move without needing to do anything. Used to, like in 3rd edition, you needed a feat for that. Not sure how they handled it in 4th. But you couldn't really do that in 1st or 2nd. You had to stay, move and then shoot, and then you're kind of done. But 5th edition, you can like, here's an arrow slit, and however many guys you have back there can just pop in, shoot, pop back.
Full cover.
Full cover. And then the player is reduced to waiting for readied action using their single attack reaction to try to retaliate against that. And now they're standing still, not moving through. Well, what's happening? Well, there's a fire coming up, or there's a phalanx of kobolds with their shields and long spears, and you can't really target any of them. That's a way to do it from a DM perspective, but that can lead to adversarial DMing. And maybe you like that.
Yeah.
Maybe you like that. Maybe you like living in a world where, death is around the corner at any moment. You play on PvP servers when you log into whatever MMO you like, and you want that kind of experience in D&D. Nothing wrong with that. But if you're not down for adversarial DMing as a player, it can be just a huge slog and lead you to play characters that you might not otherwise play because you just want to survive.
At our table, we usually strike a happy balance. As many tactics as possible to get us into the best position possible.
Right.
And then just unleash. Not necessarily with like Molotovs and whatever, but it's more about getting the right people in the right spot, and you just like SEAL Team 6 it, you know?
Right, and I think that there's that a happy middle does kind of look like that. So if I'm designing encounters when a combat is war approach, I don't pay any attention to party composition or level. This is what the encounter is. If it's 50 goblins at first level and the party gets plowed, then they should have run. But if it's like, the party's 5th level and it's 2 goblins, then it's like, yeah, those goblins are toast. Like they've got no chance. I don't usually create balanced encounters in a way that really works for combat as sport. You have to be really kind of good at figuring out how your players are, how they work, what they like, what their play style is, what characters did they make, what builds do they have. I think, that we've got a happy middle, sort of like I create more combat as war friendly style encounters, but don't necessarily play the monsters 100% out to get you. Sometimes I might, if it's appropriate for a particular enemy, but at the same time, I don't want to encourage or promote any kind of adversarial DMing for me, just because that's not my play style. That's sort of where I found the balance for myself.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah.
Even if it is favoring one over the other.
The DM should be an impartial arbiter of the rules.
Right.
And basically just relating the tale being told. Now, however you write that is one thing, but you don't necessarily have to just like, I'm going to try to kill you all the time.
Right.
We played with DMs that were kind of adversarial, and it is a different experience.
Very different.
And coming out of that, you start to realize like, oh wait,
it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
So I think, and yes, adversarial DMing is one of those things where you have to trust your DM. Yeah. Because there's really nothing stopping them from going. They have infinite resources at their disposal. The players, if you're playing by the rules, you have your character and what's written on your character sheet. But the DM is free to make up whatever they want to throw at you. So when you start venturing too far into adversarial DMing and you're winning a lot, then the DM's just letting you win. Right? Like, that's the kind of thing that I think about. Now, there is a way of playing where the DM goes, listen, I'm going to role play my NPCs to the fullest, which means I'm not going to give them any advantages they wouldn't otherwise have. I'm going to make up my own content, but I'm going to make it so that it makes sense, it's plausible, and more importantly, the players can do something about it. They can recon the situation. They can engage in asymmetrical combat.
Yeah.
They can use unfair tactics against me in the same way that I might use them against them. And in that respect, the DM's not letting you win. You're both engaging in this kind of play. But if the DM ventures into, no, I'm going to kill the party, then there's not a lot. Rocks fall. Everybody dies. I mean, usually if that's where you've gotten to in the game, then something's gone off kilter.
Whenever you're just walking down a corridor and the DM goes, yeah, you see a goblin, pull a lever, and the ceiling collapses in on you.
Right. Yeah, game over.
Make a save, disadvantage.
So I think that those are some of the pitfalls of combat as war. What I like the most about combat as sport is it says combat is a part of the game and should be fun and interesting in and of itself.
Yeah.
We don't need to go full-on war game over here.
Right.
But there's something about the excitement. There's a reason why there's so much combat in D&D, and it's because it is exciting when initiative is rolled, when you're figuring out your actions, in those moments of combat where it's like a hair's breadth between a really bad day for the party or they pull out an amazing victory.
Yeah.
Those are the things that make combat fun. And so I think the combat as sport people take that seriously. And they're like, yeah, this should be. And they spend a lot of time crafting their encounters and thinking about their combat encounters, the environments they take place in, the NPCs that are going to be there. And a good combat encounter will also have role-playing elements to it, or certainly implications for role-playing down the road, if not moments of role-playing in the combat itself, that they take that seriously. And I think that those are the positive things about combat as sport. And a combat as sport DM playing with combat as sport players will have these elaborate, huge, sprawling fights that are epic in nature, and as they hop from airship to airship, and there's all these different things involved. And so that's what I've tried to work into some of my encounters once I kind of became aware of this, of these two poles, is to be like, there are times where it's more important to get an epic feel to the combat, and it doesn't necessarily have to be cutthroat or, so I'm thinking like the end of my Rise of Tiamat campaign. I didn't know how it was going to end. I didn't know what you guys necessarily were going to do, but I did know that I wanted it involving as many PCs on dragons as possible, and a bunch of them wheeling about the air over a battlefield of evil humanoids and the armies of the Lord's Alliance and Order of the Gauntlet. And so that's, through your actions and my NPCs, we managed to get to that point. But at the same time, I wasn't like meticulously adding up the CRs of everything in order to make sure that it was an appropriate party for 16th level characters, or appropriate encounter for 16th level characters. Some of the downsides might be that it eventually, if everything is perfectly balanced, then it just becomes monotonous.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, like, as you're sitting here talking, I'm like thinking about how the development of the game and the mechanics that are given to certain classes or whatever, don't they really kind of lead players to play more combat as sport, where you want to make sure, like, oh, this guy has a thing to give him disadvantage, so my tank can go up and not worry about getting hit and keep the guy on him, and he's doing the range damage, and everybody's doing their part to make sure this thing works properly, right?
Right.
Everybody gets to shine.
Right.
But if they didn't have those special mechanics,
right. If they just had an attack and action,
like second edition or whatever, where it's back and it's more about what the player can think about doing, as opposed to how they can use the rules they have at their disposal.
Right.
See what I mean?
I see what you mean. Yeah. I think what you're getting at, and correct me if I'm wrong, is sort of like an idea that there is player skill at playing the game, at knowing the tricks, the tactics, the things to do, and then there's character ability, which is gained through level advancement, the certain build that you're using. And I do think over the course of D&D's evolution that character ability has come to at least meet, if not exceed, player skill in that regard. And I do think Combat as War is testing the character's ability to survive this fight and do well. But the thing of it is that the player still has to be good enough, clever enough, skillful enough with the game to create a character and play it well in those combat as sport encounters. And so in that respect, I do kind of see combat as sport as testing both of those things, player skill and character ability, whereas I see combat as war as really more about player skill. You're going to use your character's abilities, but it's really more about what you can think up and how you, and sometimes literally how can you outsmart the DM. They've set up a problem for you. Can you figure it out through clever role playing?
Yeah.
But I do think that combat as sport is test as much the character as it does the player.
Right.
In terms of downsides for combat as sport, I think it can get monotonous if everything's just perfectly balanced and it's like, where's the uncertainty?
Yeah.
Where's the?
I mean, once you figure out how to take down a hill giant, you hit him with the Ray of Innovation, and he gets in and do the thing. Then there's another hill giant. Hit him with the Ray of Innovation, do a thing, and hit a thing.
Yeah, and there were complaints about that with with fourth edition. We didn't really play long enough, I think, to start seeing those cracks in the system. But certainly reading people's experiences about fourth edition, both during the changeover between the two and in retrospect, it did seem like there was that where combats in fourth edition became, it's like 8 or 9 rounds of slogfest, and I've already used, and then all my players, they use their daily at the beginning of the thing, and then they're burn through all their encounter powers after that, and once they've been, and that it just sort of led to a uniformity.
Yeah.
And so if you are, say, you lean more towards combat as sport, and you're just looking to spice up your combats, then introduce more uncertainty. Yeah. Introduce elements of chance and randomness that could swing the tide of battle in either direction and radically alter the game board for a round, or open yourself up to the possibility that the players could completely bypass an encounter through clever role playing and scouting out the enemy, setting up a trap for them, denying them resources that they need, and maybe try that out. And obviously, I don't know. And when we do these shows where it's like we're talking about two extremes of one end, I always want to just be like, listen, the number one rule is still don't be a dick. and talk to each other.
Right.
Right? Like those are still the number one rules, as always. It's like, are you a combat as war DM playing with a bunch of combat as sport players?
Yeah.
Then that needs to be hashed out at closer to the beginning of the game, or just a check-in after a couple of sessions, like, hey guys, you still enjoying the game? Is there anything that you would like to see changed? I don't think that those kind of questions are out of place.
And all the players are like, well, we want to use our abilities, but all your enemies always attack from hiding.
They attack from hiding. They attack us when we're asleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of thing.
So, no, we're not having fun.
Yeah, and so then it's a time for some of those players may want to just leave, and others may want to reach some kind of compromise. And I think if you're willing to adjust your behavior, listen to what other people are saying from both a DM and a player perspective, then you'll find that happy middle somewhere.
Yeah.
It might take a while, but you'll eventually.
Find with some social interaction and exploring yourselves, you can find the balance of combat.
Right. So I don't.
You have all three tiers.
I mean, do you think like introspection, is that an insight roll for yourself? Is it just a straight charisma check?
Introspection?
Yes. There's got to be a spell for it.
The skill introspection.
There's got to be a spell.
Man, that's meta, dude.
This is why
Thinking about how your character thinks about himself.
It's true. This is why every party needs a Deanna Troi.
Dude.
Yeah. They need a counselor, because it's like, they go to these dungeons and they're dark and dangerous, and it's like, how are they processing this stuff?
Yeah.
Good grief. They all need therapy.
Yeah.
It's like every show on the CW.
Well, I mean, why do you think they come back and just get drunk to try to forget?
They booze it up.
Booze it up and just keep filling that hole in your soul, boys, with booze and treasure and magic items.
Darkest dungeon.
It's like you were trying to kill us all the time.
He was.
And you weren't. He said that. He was like, no, I'm trying to kill you. These are goblins. They want to kill you. I was like, well, yeah, you're supposed to role play the goblins, but you yourself are going, what can I use to kill them? Like you're using them as they're just the sword.
Everything. And this is this is why if you're in an adversarial DM wants to stop the Lich from showing up at first level and just going power word kill, death ray, cloud kill, like
the first time they upset their plans.
The very first time
they thwart his plans.
Yeah, that's what it leads to, and then you're just kind of like,
the dragon sends out his vassals to go collect treasure, and the heroes of the town go, fuck you, get out of here, we're not going to pay anymore. The dragon shows up, breathes fire on the whole town. The campaign is over. Everybody having fun?
That's what it leads to.
Everybody have fun.
Want some more Mountain Dew? You piece of shit.
Put some more Cheetos in your fucking mouth. Give me the Doritos.
Your face.
You came to my house, I get to kill you.
You read so many things. I was reading somebody's review of Tomb of Wars, and they were like, yeah, I really think this adventure sucks, because it's just, and then I read through, they were like, I played through this when I was 12 in the 80s, and you're just kind of like, but it sounds like you were a huge dick. Like you laughed as they happily crawled inside the sphere of annihilation. You cackled as they died to poison and had their stuff stolen, and laughed gleefully as your entire party died. You're a dick. It's not the module. You're just an ass. That's why you didn't like it. Good grief.
Oh.